All right, here we go. Another show in another week that somebody in my family is sick and therefore I'm still coughing. So sorry, everybody. I got a cough drop in my throat, which is highly unprofessional, but it's the lesser of two evils of me hacking all over the place. So that's my little
Man,
professional intro.
I was going to say, what an intro, Pat. I mean, just leading with the positivity
Man,
right there.
the
I'm
Sherwood
sorry that you're sick.
household
That's
is down hard, man, for like weeks
yes,
because with
it's no
five
good.
people in the family, everybody gets it. And it takes like 7 weeks to move through everybody. And then the little girl picks something up at daycare and the cycle starts again. So we've been getting slammed. But anyway,
I
the
love it.
the show today is about an ebook that I put out. It's free. You can go to CrossFitLinchpin.com, click on ebook, get it for free. Enjoy. And I didn't really have any intentions of writing one. It wasn't like a lifelong dream.
Sure.
I would get questions from people frequently who are programming nerds and like wanted a resource to go to, and I'd point them to all the classic ones that we're familiar with, and probably one of the greatest ones that if people haven't read, they should, is Greg Glassman wrote one in 2002 or three. It's in February, and it's called A Theoretical Template for CrossFit's Programming. I've read that a billion times, inspired by it. But those and some other ones as well, I always felt there were some stones left unturned. And so this last time when I had to start creating a 4-week block of training, I just said, you know what, I'm going to open a document and I'm going to just start typing like an almost stream of consciousness as to why this is happening. And if it goes somewhere, cool. So that's basically the whole genesis of it.
Well, I love it. I was going to lead the witness here and say that this show is based on your favorite topic, which is talking about yourself.
Oh my goodness.
I've known you for long
you
enough.
talk about me for a while.
And I know it's one of your favorite things to do is when the conversation squarely focused on Pat Sherwood, that's like the best for you. So anyway, no, let's try to make it about the book. But I am really curious. And that was kind of the first thing that I wanted to talk about. But before all that, congratulations. I mean, I think it's really
thanks,
cool.
man.
And I love that it's out there. I love that it's free. I mean, that's just so cool and kind of core to the old school ethos where it's like, hey, man, it's out there. Use it or don't. Take it and make it better. Get what you can from it. Like, I think that's such a cool thing to keep alive. So good for you for doing that.
And I would like to tell everyone too, like, please, 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 I don't have this much hubris, right? I'm not saying this is how you or anybody else should program. I'm just saying,
Yep.
I've been doing this for a while. I've found something that works really well and helps me not make knucklehead decisions. And if you'd like to read it and see if it leads you somewhere, great. That's it.
Well, and that's the other thing that you queued me up beautifully. That was the other thing that I was struck as I was reading through it was just how often you come back to the central message of, look, this is one approach. Don't be beholden to it. The magic's going to get killed if you get too rigid. Yep. These are just things that I've observed and I've crafted within my own process that work for me. However, this is not, the only way to tackle it. And I find that so refreshing because I think that so many times these days, everybody's got the secret sauce and, oh my goodness, how could it be any other way? But that message is not part of your offering, which I think is great. So,
well, and not to get us off track, but I know there are some folks, because I've talked to them, who are almost offended that anything past like Greg's original would come out as if it is a finished work under thick glass in a museum. You're not allowed to touch it or breathe on it. You smile, you take a selfie, and you move on. And it's like, I don't think anybody in the whole fitness world is beyond like, hey, like play with these things. Let's try to establish, always evolve. So that was it. That was the whole genesis.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting attitude to take too, because having been around CrossFit for a long time and having been around Greg and so many of the like early adopters and influencers, I don't want to speak for them, but to me, the takeaway was like, no, this is a living thing. It's not this like static.
I agree. I am in that camp, my friend. I'm in that camp.
Yeah. And so it is interesting that people want to look back and kind of codify this into something that's like, no, it's forever this way.
But free reign to hack up what I created. Have a blast.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so let's get into it. I love that you have that approach in the beginning where it's basically a pyramid of decision making. And so the first decision that you kind of lead people through is, let's get the heavy days on the books.
Yeah.
And so kind of curious as to how that has evolved over the years. Like, why do you start with the heavy days and not, say, time domains, which is kind of at the tail end of your process?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, there's a bunch there, and I'll try to make it concise. And I remember I was chatting with actually Chad Vaughn. He started with the heavy days as well, which when he does GPP programming for
Makes
people,
sense.
and I was like, but when he does GPP programming for
Yeah.
people and not just lifting. And in my mind, I was like, look, we're not going heavy every day.
Right.
Okay. As a matter of fact, it's unusual to have 2 classic heavy days in 1 week. You know, you might have a heavy day and a heavy day at a high heart rate, or maybe in a 10-day period, 2 classics and a heavy day at a high heart rate, but you're not going heavy plus Metcon every day. So if you're going to lift heavy, let's just say once, you better put a tremendous amount of time, thought, and effort as to what that movement happens to be, how it relates to everything else that's happening that week, the rep scheme as well. It's just too important if you only get one shot at it to be willy-nilly and hope that it's just going to work out in the long run. And but we're doomed. We're doomed with the timeline, Adrian.
No, it's great. Go with it. Just let it happen.
In my personal opinion, I'll take a stance, and this might chap some behinds. It's I'll also hear some folks in the interwebs be like, I don't even know why we're having this discussion. All CrossFit programming is the same. Like, what do you like? And that immediately in my mind, it qualifies that person as being so ignorant on the topic. I mean, you could have a gymnastics bias, a heavy bias, whatever happened to bias, right?
Or just a thoughtless program that doesn't have any real structure to it,
right?
Which I think happens.
It would, and I would say you can get away with it for a while, right? Like,
sure.
Like, let's just say rather thoughtless programming. If it's just as simple as, you know what, well, I went below parallel today, I guess we shouldn't tomorrow. That's about the extent of like the thought you're putting into it. And you have functional movements, and you're going to sprinkle some intensity in there. You'll get beginners who haven't had experience to functional movements and variance and intensity. Their fitness will skyrocket. And you may even launch some people into the intermediate status like that, but they'll get stuck there or plateaued, is my personal opinion. And if you want to get somebody, hi, my daughter's waving at me. Hey, honey. If you want to get somebody with 1 workout a day and nothing more, and no linear strength program and none of that other stuff, like 1 workout a day for somebody who's still been doing CrossFit 10 years and is like an advanced level athlete, you can't willy-nilly choose anything and not something as critical as that heavy day if you're only going to do it once.
Yeah, I was really struck reading through that section in particular. I had a couple of notes that I jotted down here. And I think it ties back to this conversation that always seems to recirculate, which is, why not do a heavy day plus conditioning in the same session? My affiliate programs that way. Is it good? Is it bad? Like, that's forever going to be a topic, I believe.
Keeps us employed.
Yeah. And I think you and I, if you have to reduce it down, I think both of us believe that more often than not, it's better to approach one thing and really knock it out of the park during that session than it is to try to do everything or multiple things. And, we've done multiple episodes on that, so I don't feel the need to rehash that here. But what I thought as I was reviewing that section on how you lay out the heavy days first, I was like, okay, if you're going to commit to this idea that it's one really focused effort per day, then you have to be really smart about that approach. And so, yes, if you're going to do that, then you necessarily have to put the time in to make sure that it's complete. And so that, I think, is a really valuable thing that I haven't really articulated in that way before, which is, yes, it's great to do one thing per day, meaning you don't have to always lift and then go huff and puff. But that makes a little bit more pressure for the person programming to make sure that they've approached things in a way that that base, when it is covered appropriately and continues to push the needle. So that really stuck out to me. It's like, okay, if you're going to do it, you got to commit and you really have to do it. You can't half-ass it, so to speak.
Yeah. Again, it's just been, what's the guy from Parks and Rec say?
Ron Swanson.
Don't half-ass it. You do one thing and use your whole ass.
That's right. There you go. So that really stuck out to me in that section. And then the second thing that really stuck out to me, particularly, you had this great page where you start talking about the process of looking back over the past up to 6 months, and you go reverse chronological order of all of the different heavy days and categorized by either a pure heavy day or like a heavy day with high heart rate, which is a cool distinction. And there's a page of that, a demonstration page in the book. And what really struck me about that was seeing that, I counted it up, and I think on that page there was 40 plus heavy day opportunities in that time frame. And so that was one of those interesting kind of aha moments, even though I've been doing this for decades now, where you see it laid out on paper and the argument of, well, you're not going to get strong doing CrossFit.
Absolutely.
When you stare at the face of that, it falls apart on its face because you say, look at all of these strength specific opportunities to improve. And so, yeah, if you're going to hold it up against the highest level powerlifting only program or a specific weightlifting program, will you continue to push the needle in strength as quickly and with as much focus as those programs? No, but it's not meant to. But will you continue to get strong? I think the opportunity is abundantly clear that it's there. And it's impossible to miss when you see it laid out in reverse chronological order like that. So really cool.
That page is one of the most striking ones too, because if everyone doesn't feel like there's enough heavy stuff, every time I lay that page out, I feel like, are we doing too much? Like there's so much heavy. And that talk of, if you do it with intentionality and you put a lot of time, thought, and effort into it, the gains that you can make without a heavy lift every day or without like a linear back squat progression are tremendous. I mean, not that one person's example is whatever, but we had somebody come over who was already like a high level lifter. Their back squat was 4 1/4, which at the btwb, that puts them above 90% on the deal. They've been doing this stuff for about 3 years with no linear back squat progression, just the stuff that you saw on that page. Their back squat went from 425 to 565 pounds. They gained 140 pounds on an already advanced level back squat, which you would say you can't be an advanced lifter and make gains unless you're getting this highly sport specific. No. I'm sorry. Like, you've been lied to. So anyway, it's worth the effort would be my 2 cents on that. So it's worth the effort.
Yeah, clearly. And like I said, it was really eye opening just to see it laid out and to be struck with like, hey, look, you don't think you're going to get strong with this laundry list of opportunities to pick up heavy stuff? You're out of your mind. So really, really excellent exercise, I think. And even if people don't adopt your particular flavor of how they approach programming, I think there's a ton of utility in that retrospective and
just
seeing
adopt
things.
Something.
Yeah, and in both directions, right? Like I think you'll be able to lay out your past program and look at it and say, okay, look at all this opportunity I'm creating. It makes sense that my program is doing what it's supposed to. Or the opposite, where you lay it out and you're like, wow, it's way more sparse than I thought it was.
Sure, and that happens.
This needs to change. Yeah, exactly.
Happens.
So that's cool. Okay, so then that kind of leads me to the next thing that jumped out at me. So as you're going on, you start laying out these heavy days. You start talking about them as, pure days or kind of heavy with a high heart rate. And then you start looking at the movements themselves and categorizing them based on your perceived need. You're like, okay, this is an A1 kind of movement, meaning that's definitely got to be next.
Yep.
And you kind of have that loose system. And what I wasn't sure about was how many of those do you allow yourself? Like, is it arbitrary how many A1s there are? Do you have kind of a mental number that you're aiming for where you're like, okay, well, there can only be 2 or 3 A1s and then I have to start bumping the categories down? Or is that more intuitive?
For the heavy or for the different movements, for other movements?
Speaking about the heavy specifically.
Okay. Yeah, so for the heavy, for each category, there would be only one A1. Like for the below parallel stuff.
Got it.
There's like several types of back squats, several types of front, several types of overhead, several types of like say squat clean. And out of all those things, only one's going to be the A1, because all of those are under the general umbrella of below parallel. And then, they have some subsets, but I'll only allow myself one. And that A1, even though based upon the data, right, this is why you can't fall in love with the sheet, the A1 might be what should be programmed next based upon your research, but you still have 4 other workouts that have to get programmed that week. So there might be something else that came up that week or the week before that it negates that, and then you go to A2 or A3. But at least you're doing that with your eyes wide open and not kind of guessing it where you should be, and you're not making just a random choice.
Got it. Okay, so on that page, you'll have, let me see if this is correct then. So you'll have an A1 by category of movement as far as what needs to show up next.
Yep.
You've already got the information as far as what recently showed up. And so that can kind of help to sift through which of those A1s really needs to be top dog.
That basically creates the priority list.
Yep.
A recency bias, whatever.
Yeah. And then based off of that, you've got a placeholder so that when you go through your other steps, you can say, okay, this A1 was obviously something that jumped out, but hey, we have these other workouts and I've kind of borrowed a movement to make this workout fit better. Therefore, maybe that A1 gets replaced by an A2.
Absolutely. And then it takes the stress and the guesswork out of it, because there's so many movements that we do. Like, how are you going to keep them straight? Unless you, and again, you don't have to do what I'm doing, but you have to have some way to keep them straight. So I'm just offering the way that I keep them straight. Because even if you go back to like that 2002 or 2003 article that Greg wrote, he has one of the pages has like monostructural weightlifting and gymnastics movements at the top. And even under, I think actually I've got the article right here because I printed it out and prepped for this. That has the biggest category is on gymnastics. It only has like a dozen movements. There's only 4 here. There's like 7 there. There's not too many to keep. Well, as the years have gone by, there's like 125 different things that we do. You're just not going to keep that straight without some sort of deal. And then like you're saying, you had that placeholder. You knew what, based upon the research, made the most sense there. You start to build out the rest of the day. Suddenly something doesn't fit. And now instead of being a stressful situation, you look back and you're like, you know what? Back squat doesn't fit. Oh, this squat cleaner front squat fits here. And that's the A3, but it fits beautifully. Great, done. And then it just, the domino falls.
Yeah, right on. Okay, cool. So then, you work through some of your other steps, and then I was kind of curious about this step where you're focused on upper body pulling and midline stabilization. And so, midline stabilization, that makes a ton of sense. Obviously, that's got to be a priority. It's kind of the foundation of so many things. But I'm curious why upper body pulling took the hot seat as opposed to upper body pressing or some other category. Like that one was called out specifically. So I'm curious as to why you arrived at that conclusion.
When I went from heavy day to engine to upper body pulling in midline, it was kind of the upper body pulling and midline were 2 things that I didn't feel generally got the respect that they deserved, or they were easy to miss or neglect. Getting the barbell from the ground to overhead generally tends to work its way in there. And so if you don't early in the process, make sure that you're getting some of the non-sexier stuff in there, you can be playing this game of catch up down the road, which is a lesson that I've learned the hard way. And so I just pay attention to it earlier in the process now.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so it's an identified potential weakness or oversight that you're like, look, let's just nip this in the bud with a check and balance so that I can't miss it. It's like it's going to jump out of the process and call to me so that I have to put it in there. That's cool.
It's grace is most likely going to make its way in there, but you might not put in the strict pull-ups and the L-sit unless you have this dedicated, like, hey, am I neglecting this? This needs to get the respect that it deserves.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
And somebody else could, hey, switch it around to whatever, your process works. You put it 4th, 2nd, 3rd, whatever you like.
Well, I think that speaks to the kind of personal nature of a lot of this, right? Like this is over time, you've noticed that left to your own devices with no process, that you might not get those categories hit as much as they need to. And other people may be the opposite way. Like you might have somebody who's like so pull heavy that they need a reminder somewhere else, and they should therefore structure their template for their own kind of bias.
And one of the
eliminate their own bias, right?
One of the other things I try to pepper in there, and I hope that people get it as well, whatever your process is I've got 9 steps here. Wherever step you're at, like you can't fall in love with what you've created, because the next step might identify something that you've like. So it's a constant. There's editing going on constantly. Don't fall in love with it.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so then you're moving through some of these other steps, and what I really thought was a cool and I think somewhat unconventional approach is that you're very late in the steps before you start talking about reps and rounds and time domains. I think, and I'll speak personally here, I really like to start with at least time domains. Time domains is always something that for me personally, I like to use as kind of a basic framework and then, build off of that. But for you, that's almost the total inverse. It's late in the game that you start really talking about the specifics of a workout.
Yeah.
Was that always the case, or is that something that over time you've kind of played around with?
It was probably over time, because I think I started with the same material that everyone else started with. And I don't have a sophisticated answer for this, so this might be overly coarse. But I, I I don't want to say that I don't think it's as important as some of the elements, but I almost don't think it's as important as some of the elements, because you could nail your time domains. Hey, look, I did a short and sharp, and I did a medium, and I did a long. And you didn't pay attention to your gross movement patterns, and you went below parallel every day, or you never went below parallel. And then I don't care about that you nailed the time domains. Like, there's something way more important than that. And so I like to get those huge, like I've got to make sure I get the heavy days right. I've got to make sure I get my gross movement patterns right. Like if there's some just foundational stuff, like I can squat, and I can, whatever the gross movement pattern happens to be, the heavy day, like I can figure out what I need to do. And then I can take that and I can create a short and sharp workout, or I can make a 20-minute AMRAP out of it. Right. And so I'd rather know what I need to do first. And then it's like, okay, short and sharp, this, that, loading, rep range. But if I go the other way and it's like, it's got to be that, it's not as important as the stuff earlier on in the process. So for me, and that was one of the things, and again, heaven forbid you critique something that was written in the journal years ago. But that was one of the biggest things that I always struggled with, is there's almost like no mention of gross movement patterns in some of the early material. It is time domains, and make sure you get a weightlifting monostructural gymnastics followed by a couplet, and make sure you get a single modality. Well, if every day was a pull from the ground, like you could mess that up. You could follow that and mess up or just beat the stuffing out of your athletes so bad that it never made any sense to me. So that's why I focused on these other ones first, and then I can make something a 3-round workout, or if I decide I need a short and sharp, it goes from a 3-round workout to maybe 3 1-round sprints with 3 minutes rest in between each. And now I've got my short and sharp, or you know what? I need a 3-rounder. The rest periods are gone. Now it's a 3-round, but I covered those major building blocks that were like mission critical to development, but like not overstressing the athlete, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a really cool approach. And I like that logic a lot about, hey, once you have some of these other elements in play, determining where the final kind of output is pretty simple. I mean, it's not difficult to add a round or two.
You got more leeway there.
Yeah, not a big deal.
I've got more leeway with to make time domains fit than I've got leeway to make gross movement patterns or heavy days fit, in my opinion. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's a great. No, I don't think that was coarse at all, man. I think that was very helpful.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, so then the other thing that I think is a pitfall that a lot of programmers kind of fall into. So if you talk about kind of step-by-step progression here, we're talking about 9 steps that you've got. Each one of those steps is pretty in-depth.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thinking. There's going to be some tinkering along the way before you kind of land on something. And even when you get to the final piece, you're going to step back. You're going to take a look at the big picture, and you're probably not done yet, right? So there's a lot of process involved, which is cool. I think one of the things that a newer coach or trainer can often get distracted by are things like equipment selection or specialty movements and objects and stuff like that. And I feel like there's almost no mention of that. And so I'm curious if and when you choose to kind of add that little bit of spice on top, how does that fit in, or does it fit in, or is it just kind of not really that important in your opinion?
When you say like a specialty, something like, give me an example of something. Like a specialty what?
Like the choice to use double kettlebells instead of a barbell, or the choice to use a sandbag instead of a deadlift, something like that.
It's and it's funny, like I stopped when I realized, I stopped. I think I put down the last thing, like there's so much more to discuss, from warm-ups to how are goal times created, to like there's so much more, and what you just talked about there could be a whole nother deal. But when after it's all created, near the end, upon review, I'll try to take a look back and make sure that we're getting in, either some single legs, some single arm, that could be with a dumbbell or a kettlebell or whatever it happens to be. And that would, to me, would be more important than the implement, right? Of doing a single arm with a dumbbell, a single arm with a kettlebell, all good to go. I will say, and also each day, the workouts that I put out and when we built this 4-week template, that's the primary workout, but then I'll make 4 other options of that. So there's 5 options total, and one of them is always a dumbbell option. So there's every single workout that you see, there's a dumbbell option every single darn day. So you're going to get in that, that great stimulus there. But then some of the other stuff, I'll take a look at the end and just try to make sure I'm not neglecting something, put in double kettlebells or kettlebell snatch instead of a dumbbell snatch, things like that. But I will be honest and say that stuff like sandbags, I don't program sandbags with any regularity at all. I don't program yokes with any regularity at all. I own a yoke and I own a ton of sandbags, and they are awesome and fun and useful. And I hope everyone has them and gets to use them. What I try to do is educate my community on how, if you have a sandbag available and it's great for the day, how you can make the decision to use that cool piece of gear. But if I program that based upon just the interaction I've had with my community over years, I think there's such a small fraction of people that actually have that gear that I would now be dismissing the overwhelming huge majority of people that are going to choose the workout and programming it for the small select few that have the cool gear. So I'd rather do it for the masses and then educate everybody on, hey, you're always authorized to use that cool piece of gear that you have, and this is how you could do that personally.
Yeah, cool. And there's another strong theme within the book that is, the mark of the true professional, and these are my words, but I think this is what you're trying to convey to some degree, is knowing what you can trim away and really get to the core of what's important. And I would argue that, just kind of based on the way you've laid things out and your answer right there, that there probably is some legitimacy to the fact that, equipment choice, looking at some of these more exotic toys, they are nice to have.
They're
but
fun.
You don't need to have them.
Yeah, they're fun. I really am a minimalist at heart, quite frankly.
Yeah, me too. And it's funny because I look around my garage right now and I'm like, dude, I got every toy you could ever want. But
I get everything.
But when it comes right down to it, man, you give me 10 square feet and a single kettlebell, and I'm going to be just happy with it. So
amen. Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah, cool. Well, I really I've only got like one more.
Okay.
Serious question here, and
I'm gonna take a cough drop for it.
Okay, yeah, get ready. I think this might be an easy one, and we might have already addressed it at the outset. But this is a huge volume of work, and it's not something that you came across easily. This reflects like a ton of effort on your part, not just to write this document, but the process that has evolved over years, and not just going through that, but being able to sit back and actually look at yourself and articulate it. So that being said, like, why free? Why do you put it out there for free?
I've had several people ask me the same question. I would say personally, it's a throwback to, like I said, I've got it printed out here. Greg's, I'll tell you what year just so people can have it. Greg's original article, theoretical template for CrossFit's programming, February 2003, CrossFit Journal issue 6. That's a good one there.
How about it? Yeah.
I owe so much to Greg Glassman and what he created, and he gave away so much for free that it was ridiculous. And I've personally never forgot that. I mean, in all this stuff, all this work that I do, whatever, it's in true like CrossFit fashion. Like it's posted every day for free. It's not behind a paywall. You can see these workouts for free every darn day. And I've tried to stay true to those roots. And Greg gave out a lot, and so I kind of feel like it's some of our duty to carry the torch. And so it's kind of me paying it forward, and hopefully somebody else can pay it forward.
Yeah, right on. I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot because this is one that's taken this question a little bit deeper. But how come you're not afraid that somebody else isn't going to open up Linchpin 2 and just copy your method? And how come there's no fear of that? Why is that something that doesn't seem to be a part of the conversation?
I've had that question, and I don't know. And I also know when you open the books like this, you open yourself to both praise and criticism.
Sure.
Someone can tear it apart and make a 28-part series. That's why it's the dumbest thing they've ever seen. The
counter is that people actually have to watch that rebuttal.
Yeah,
too, right?
True. My thing I would say is I hope it helps people, but I also like it's a fair amount of work, and it's not like sexy work. Like it's just a lot of like grind to go through. Now I happen to enjoy it, and that's a gift, but I liken it to, here's the best analogy that I can give. Matt Chan, you know him. Remember when
Fantastic guy. Yep.
Remember when there was the CrossFit competitors course?
Sure do. Yep.
He was giving a lecture.
Shout out Matt Chan and Eric O'Connor for that. That was a great.
I think it's Spiel's gym in Park City. And he was laying out how to be a games athlete and how to train. And he was doing it in Utah, which was his region, back with regionals. And there was somebody in the audience who basically raised a hand like, look, I'm not trying to call you out, but why would you tell us what we need to do? Because we're going to compete against you. Yeah. And God bless Matt Chan. He goes, because it's so hard, you won't do it for more than 2 weeks.
I love it. Oh, like, Matt, so good.
Wasn't that a great answer? And so,
for
like,
sure.
It's just a ton of work, man. So, like, I'd probably have somebody else do it for me too. I'm already doing it. You know, like,
no, it's great.
But there are programming nerds out there, myself being one of them. And so this is just a book that I wish that I had. And if you are falling into that camp of you want to dive into it, have a blast, my friend, and no pride in authorship. Tear it up and rework it however you want to rework. It's my gift to you.
Yeah, and I think there's a ton of utility. This is something that I think a lot of the old school crew did, whether they thought that they were doing it or not. But it was kind of monkey see, monkey do, in the sense that you would, at least I did, I would start with the main site and I would do the main site. And then I would get to the point where I was comfortable enough with it, even if I didn't really understand the workings. I was comfortable enough with it that I could kind of get to the point of predicting what was happening next. And then I would do that with people that were in that kind of orbit and putting workouts out there. I would jump to the next one and kind of take a look at it and try to reverse engineer how they arrived at those decisions. And even if it didn't make sense to me, in the sense that I, didn't adopt that method, or, I thought that maybe there was a different way to approach things that was easier for me or better or whatever, I always learned something. And I think that process is so valuable. So for all of you younger coaches, particularly, even those of you that have been around the block for a while, taking a look at somebody else's process can not only inform your own, but it can also kind of give you some guidelines as far as like, where do you think about this stuff and how do you clarify your thinking? So I think it's valuable for everybody.
Cool. Well, hopefully people enjoy it. And
I got one more question if you're open to it.
Yeah, of course.
I kind of pitched it to you like that was the closer, but one more. So you got this process. It's awesome. It's thorough. How often do you find yourself now going back and saying, okay, I think these steps need to be reevaluated, or, I need to change this process? Like, is that a slower time scale that happens over weeks and months and there's gradual change? Or do you ever have those moments where you look back and you're like, we need a hard stop and a reset in this regard?
It's probably slow and gradual. I would say it's probably that one. And I will actually say, it's one of those things where you might know a lot about a certain topic, but if you have to go up in front of people and lecture about it, it makes you so much better on that topic. So like, this is my process and I've been doing this forever, but I hadn't like written it all down step by step with like this conscious stream of thought and like tried to like lay it out in a way that somebody else could do it. It was so valuable for me for like to analyze. Like I had to take a hard look. I'm like, hey, I'm going to put this out. Is this stupid? Like, is people are going to be reading this. Like it was really like putting the magnifying glass on it, which I hadn't done it to that degree, I guess, ever. And so that was a hard analysis that I don't think I've ever done. And I was happy with how it went. Again, nothing's perfect. I ain't claiming this is perfect. I'm just saying it works quite well. And so it was valuable and that was recent. And so maybe now that I've had this out for a little bit, I can ruminate on some things and see if it does create some evolution. But for the time being, it stood up well when I had to write it down. I thought that was like a good test. Because heaven forbid, I got to the end of it. I'm like, I ain't publishing this. This is terrible. Nobody has to know that I even thought about it.
Exactly. This cannot see the light of day.
Right. Exactly. My little secret.
Well, I'm thankful that wasn't the case and that this is out there in the world and that, it's available to people. So I'll give you the softball on the lead out here now. Where can people find it? And, what kind of closing thoughts do you have around it?
Go to CrossFitLinchpin.com and there's a little tab marked eBook. and then you can get it for free right there. It'll
Cool.
get sent to you via email.
Yeah,
I
check
think
it out, people.
I think
worth it.
programming is really cool. It's not all the same, and that's neither good nor bad. You can do whatever you want with it. You can have a strength bias, you can have a gymnastics bias, you can have an endurance bias, you can have a GPP bias, which is what I try to do. Like, it's an awesome, amazing blank slate. And I honestly think there's not a lot of actual useful material out there because, again, credit where credit is due. Prior to Greg Glassman, it was largely segmented training. Like, all the books on how to do things and exercise physiology, like, it's all about segmented training. It's not mixed modality of powerlifting and Olympic lifting and sprinting and running long. And there's nothing out there telling you how to create strength and conditioning protocols for that. It doesn't exist. And so there's a need, and I hope other people fill it as well, because there's a lot of smart people out there. So that's it. Yeah. Fun.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for letting me put you in the hot seat for a little bit. That was kind of fun to interview you. And like I said, I know it's not maybe your favorite thing to have the spotlight directly on you, but I think it's really valuable for people out there. So thank you for everything that went into it.
I much like yourself, I don't do a lot of, it's funny, we have this podcast, but we don't do a lot of podcasts. Like, I actually don't really enjoy being the guest. It's weird, even though it's bizarre in some reason. So anyway, all right, cool. Well, also on top of that, hey, you want to support the show? Go to verynotRandom.com. A lot of cool stuff there. And we'll be back next week with another show. So for Adrian Bosman, I'm Pat Sherwood, and we will see you next time.